start with the Standard & Poor, what the statement that they released, and not the entire statement because that's a bit long, but I was just going to give you excerpts of it before I introduce my resource persons for the show this morning. So S&P downgrades Ghana on the back of intensifying finance and external pressures. So Accra, Monday, 8th August 2022. On 5th August 2022, Standard & Poor Global Ratings downgraded Ghana's foreign and local credit ratings from B- B to CCC plus C with a negative outlook. According to Standard & Poor, the downgrade is due to intensifying finance and external pressures on the economy. So that's from Standard & Poor. And they say, in arriving at the decision, the credit rating agency considered, A, the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the severe global shock of the Russian invasion of Ukraine on Ghana and the consequent fiscal and external imbalances. And B, elevated gross financing needs in the face of international capital market hiatus. Right? C, the limited commercial financing options, and D, the credible steps taken by government to fast-track fiscal consolidation and the passage of key revenue bills. So they took this into consideration. That's interesting. Now, let's not look at the government response. Indeed, the finance minister had to respond to this statement by Standard & Poor. And it says the government is disappointed by S&P's decision to downgrade Ghana despite the bold policies implemented in 2022 to address macro fiscal challenges and debt sustainability, which have been significantly exacerbated by the impact of these global external shocks on the economy. Government will continue to be proactive in addressing the impact of these external and domestic headwinds on the economy and on the lives and livelihoods of Ghanaians. And it continues to say government has implemented key revenue expenditure measures, including the 30% cut in discretionary expenditures. The delays in the passage of key revenue measures introduced in the 2022 budget affected revenues performance in the first half of the year. However, all the revenue measures introduced in the 2022 budget, including the revenue of the MDA fees and charges bill, the tax exemption bill, the e-levy bill, have all been promulgated by Parliament. These fiscal measures are now in full implementation mode to support our fiscal and debt sustainability policies. And it says the government is committed and is confident that it will successfully emerge from these challenges in the shortest possible time, as we've demonstrated the track record to do so in the Akufo-Addo-led government. Our current engagement with the International Monetary Fund for a program incorporating our enhanced domestic program is expected to support our drive to restore and sustain macroeconomic stability, debt sustainability, promote growth and job creation, whilst ensuring social protection to achieve our vision of a Ghana beyond aid. And that's where it ends. All right. So we've seen what the Standard & Poor have said. We've also seen government respond to what the Standard & Poor have said. As I did indicate, Fitch later came up with his own ratings, and that's it. Fitch downgrades Ghana to CCC, and I'll be reading that to you shortly. And this is straight from Hong Kong, 10th August 2022. Fitch ratings has downgraded Ghana's long-term foreign currency, that's LTFC, issuer default rating, that's IDR, to CCC from B-. Now, Fitch typically does not assign outlooks to sovereigns with a rating of CCC plus or below. Now, that's a full list of rating actions is below. That's key rating drivers, increasing possibility of debt restructuring. The downgrade reflects deterioration of Ghana's public finances, which has contributed to a prolonged lack of access to the Eurobond market, in turn leading to a significant decline in external liquidity. In the absence of new external finance sources, international reserves will fall. That's close to 2 months of current external payment debt. That's debits in the current accounts by end 2022. The government has requested support from the IMF, which is likely to lead to additional financing from the IMF and other multilateral lenders However, the government's high interest cost and structurally low revenue as a percentage of GDP have increased the likelihood that IMF support would necessitate some form of debt treatment, although this is not our main scenario. The high interest burden on local currency debt also means that inclusion of a domestic debt treatment cannot be ruled out. Now, IMF program pending. In July 2022, the authorities reversed a long-standing position against seeking IMF support. Fitch believes that a deal with the IMF is likely within the next 6 months. We estimate that a program could disburse as much as $3 billion and unlock budget support from other multilateral lenders. However, the timing of such a deal is uncertain and would be dependent on the government's ability to present a credible fiscal reform plan in line with increasing government revenue and improving debt affordability metrics. The most recent IMF debt sustainability analysis conducted in 2021 found Ghana at a high risk of debt distress and vulnerable to shocks from market access and high debt service costs. Now, I'm going to end with this. Tight external debt servicing schedule. Now, Fitch estimates, okay, now listen to this. Fitch estimates that Ghana faces $2.75 billion of external debt servicing in 2022, including amortization and interest, and $2.8 billion in 2023. Access to external financing will remain tight, as Ghana is likely to remain locked out of Eurobond markets, which had come to be a regular source of external financing for the government. In 2022, we expect that the government will meet its external debt obligations in part through a combination of a $750 million USD term loan from the African Exporters Import Bank and $250 million in syndicated loans from international commercial banks and up to $200 million from other sources. So it goes on and on and on and on. I'll be speaking to an economist, Courage Mate of DataBank, for his quick thoughts on what this actually means. But my guests are also seated. I've got the Honourable Member of Parliament for Cape Coast South. That's Honourable George Kweku Rickett Hagan. He's here with me. Honourable, good morning. Good to see you. How are you? You're not looking bad at all, even though we're in difficult times. You know, I don't know. You would have to teach me how to.
They say in Ghana, by His grace.
By His grace. How to rigmarole myself out of this, economic dire straits. And also, a very good friend of mine. That's the man Palgrave Wachi Danko. Good morning, sir. Good to see you.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm well.
Good. I'm a little hyper this morning because you're looking good.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
You don't look bad.
When is the reshuffling coming on?
It's the president's decision.
It's the president's decision. Yeah. I'd hope and wish that you're affected positively by the reshuffle. That's just my personal hope and aspiration. There's nothing wrong with that.
I may bet you.
I like that. I bet you. Anyway, and Michael Niabe. Now, Michael Niabe is with the Friedrich Ebert Foundation. Now, he says just say FES. FES, yeah. Just for short. Makes it easier. He's a programs manager there. So essentially, he's going to be dealing more with governance issues, okay? He's not going to be talking a lot about the economy, even though he's Ghanaian, he goes to the market, he knows how the economy is biting, but he's not going to be looking at the technicalities of his year, typically to look at the governance, maybe perhaps the posture of the government. Even in these difficult times we find ourselves, he may want to have some thoughts on that. But his main passion this morning has to do with the call for reshuffle and whether indeed we're just going to go through just this normal convention or there's basis for this socio-economically, politically, whatever it is, and that's why he has an opinion to share on that. So you don't want to miss out on that. This is Inside Pages on Metro Television. So I'll be expecting Courage Martin to join us shortly to do he's not a politician. Yeah, he's going to do a quick analysis of what this downgrades by this global, credible, reputable rating agencies. We're talking Moody's, we're talking Fitch, we're talking Standard & Poor. Doesn't look good. Anyway, let me start whilst waiting for Courage Martin. Mr. Abdallah, my lead producer, would be calling him shortly. Okay, so Courage Martin is on. He's a financial analyst. Courage Martin, good morning. It's good to have you on the show this morning.
Good morning, Moro. Thanks for having me.
How are you, my brother?
We can't complain.
Right. Now, those of us who are laymen, I haven't been to any economics class, I've not been to any finance class, just a poor marketing consultant. Now, you do this for a living. When you hear that Moody's, Fitch, Standard & Poor have downgraded our ratings from B- to CCC+, what does that mean, really? Help the ordinary man to understand what this means for Ghana's economy.
Sure, Moro. Thanks for having me. And I try to be as basic and simplistic simplistic
Please
as
do.
possible.
Yes.
So let's consider whatever I'll say, at least
Mr.
preliminary.
Mr. Courage if you can speak up a little bit, I'll very much appreciate it.
All right. Can you hear me better now?
I can hear you now. You're much better now. It's much clearer now.
Okay, sure. So I'll do a very simplistic analysis or review just for the purpose of everybody's understanding. Now, the credit rating agencies are essentially supposed to be independent entities to provide opinions, their opinions about a potential or prospective borrower. So, Moro, if I want to borrow money from you and I come to you that, Moro, I need you to lend me, say, 2,000 cedis. You, Moro, will say I should do two things. You say I should bring my pay slip for you to analyze it and determine whether I earn enough. And you will also require me to provide what I typically will spend money on, what I will also spend the loan I'm requesting from you on, just for you to determine whether I have enough space to be able to pay you back your money with the interest you are likely to charge.
Okay.
Beyond that, you also need someone who is independent minded to also review my financial position, my use of funds, and then also give you an independent opinion or a third party opinion about my credit worthiness, meaning, am I worthy to take the loan from you? And this is where the international rating agencies come in as the third party independent providers of their credit opinion on me, here, me representing the sovereign, that I am credit worthy or I am not credit worthy. Now, downgrading, or when they rate us, they are rating us at a certain credit level. And it means whether you are risky, highly risky, speculative, credit worthy, and so on and so forth. Now, this downgrade, anytime you are downgraded, it means that your credit worthiness has reduced. Your risk profile has increased. That is what it means. And so your credit worthiness has reduced. Now, specifically downgrading us to C levels or triple C means that not only has our credit worthiness reduced, we are at a risk of not being able to pay what we currently owe. So essentially, this is what it means. And ultimately, and by implication, we are less likely to get credit from other lenders. And if we do, it's likely to come at a high credit risk premium being charged on whatever interest rate we are asked to pay.
That we're giving, beside the fact that we need to sort out our balance of payment issues, one of the reasons we're also giving was that, look, once we start engaging the IMF, it's going to give out some positive indications out there to the investor community to know that, look, once the doctor is in town, that's the IMF hospital, if, just for the sake of this argument, now that the patient has been taken to the hospital, it gives a certain semblance of hope that things are going to improve going forward. So hold on a minute. We know we owe you. We may not be able to pay now, but now that IMF is in town, it should bring back that hope. So how then did these credit rating agencies all of a sudden are saying that, look, we look like a bunch of people who will not be able to pay, our or service our loans? How did we get here? Does that mean that the markets didn't respond positively to the IMF engagement with us?
Well, they did. If you watch the behavior of our Eurobond curve or yield curve, you notice that they did in the first week or two after we announced our approach to the IMF. Because yields, which is an indicator of how investors rate us from a credit risk perspective, yields came down slightly across the Eurobond curve. And that is an indication that they are happy with our approach to the IMF for assistance. However, beyond that point, when the dust settled, there are other issues that came to the fore. And to put it in a layman's language, in what condition did you go to the hospital to approach the doctor for treatment? If you approached the doctor for treatment at the early stages of your symptoms or when the sickness commenced, the hope would have been largely sustained. But it appears when the dust settled, the market is realizing that we approached the doctor in the worst state, and we might be requiring more than just treatment, probably requiring as much as surgery. And that complicates the whole matter in the short term before the actual treatment begins. And so that is where we are beginning to see all this raft of downgrades and worsening of our yields and so on and so forth.
Wow. Now, finally, perhaps my penultimate question. So, what would this mean for the economy, in very basic terms, going forward? Are things going to get tougher? Are things going to get harsher? Or what does that mean for what? If a Ghanaian should be worried about this, what should be the reason why?
Well, if I look at how our macro indicators have performed since July 1, and July 1 being the date we requested or officially requested an IMF support, if I look at the behavior of the macro indicators to date, it appears it is likely to get worse, or it is getting worse before it gets better. It will ultimately get better once we are able to secure a fund-assisted program, we secure a balance of payment support, we get technical support to deal with our macro and debt issues, it will ultimately get better. But then the process in arriving to that better point will probably be one that a lot of Ghanaians would have to persevere, because adjustment from a period of expansionary fiscal and monetary policy into a restrictive controlled fiscal and monetary policy is very tight. I mean, you might find more taxes constraining your spending powers. You might find tight liquidity as a result of central bank measures. So it's going to get tighter or worse before it gets better. And we are not looking at over 2 years period. It can go beyond even 3 years, depending on the nature of the program we also sign up for. So in sum, I believe it will get bitter before it gets sweet. It probably gets worse before it gets better.
Right. Now, let me just finally ask you this. Now, do you think that based on the situation or the current circumstances that Ghana, or the predicament that Ghana finds itself, we should kickstart a national dialogue that will be seeking to tackle Ghana's worsening fiscal situation, an immediate national dialogue, as the former president John Dramani Mahama is calling for and is suggesting it's not the way forward. In fact, the documents that were supposed to be the expanded, I've forgotten what technical name is, but the document was supposed to be forming, which would be the basis upon which you're going to be having a conversation or these talks with the IMF. Some civil society organizations are saying they want to make some input into this. And that sort of falls in line perhaps with what the former president has said. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, I do. And of course, if you look at how the IMF engages with countries that calls on them, and whenever they do their visit, even if it's just for Article 4 consultations, they do not only meet with government officials, they meet with government officials, they meet with members of the Legislative House, they meet with civil society and the business community. So that call is in the right order, because you need a buy-in into the policies. I mean, you need organized labor to understand why we can only stagger pay increases or cannot accommodate certain levels of pay increases. And you need also civil society to understand why certain measures are being put in place. And if you also look at what happened in Parliament regarding the approval of some of the revenue measures and how it delayed until now, it tells you that you need this broader consultation to get everyone to buy into the IMF program and the proposed policies that will be put on the table. So it's a call in the right order, and it's one that we will support so that we get the whole nation and those that matter, steering in the right direction, so that we don't have opposing forces restricting or preventing our progress.
All right, Mr. Courage Marty, thank you very much for your time, and you have yourself a good day, sir. That's Mr. Courage Mate. He's an economist. He's a financial analyst as well. He works with Data Bank, telling us what the implications of the ratings by global credit agencies and Ghana's ability to repay its debts, and the fact that we've now been categorized into a speculative group, which means that we are likely to default on paying the loans, the huge loans that we have contracted. Let me come back in house and pick the thoughts of my resource persons who have been seated for a while now. But before then, 0249, please put this number now. For those of you who would want to send us a message to express your thoughts or opinions on what we're talking about, it's 0249 155 646. 0249 155 646. Please don't call this number. Just send a WhatsApp message. That's all. Don't call. I beg you. Just send a WhatsApp message. 0249 155 646. So that's the number. So let me come back in house. Now, let me start with the government rep here before I come to the Honorable Rickett Hagan. Mr. Palgrave, Wachidankwa, this must really be some tough, difficult moments for the government. You agree?
Well, Mauro, very good morning to you and good morning to my colleague panelists here. Indeed, this is some very difficult times for us as a government, and we appreciate the feedback that we have received from these ratings. It's a clear indication, really, for us as a government that our decision to go to the IMF is one of a curious moment, which we have seized. You would appreciate and realize that from March, when the president had his cabinet retreat, he mentioned that the following March, especially as we put together measures, were going to be very difficult moments for our country. And we should all ensure that in the midst of that, we tighten our belts and burden share. One of the things that I recall the president stating was that a number of the measures that the finance minister and even our government was going to roll out were going to be very difficult for the Ghanaian people. And I think that these ratings also appreciate the impact of COVID-19 and also the impact of the Russia invasion into Ukraine. And they also appreciate the expenditure cuts that government has put in place.
Right.
And our government has done credibly well in ensuring and managing these global twin crises and alleviating the impact of that on the Ghanaian people. The measures that we put in place is estimated to yield some millions of money into the Ghanaian economy. We cut down expenditure by 30% in terms of all government expenditure. We cut down fuel allowance by 50%. We cut down per diems by 50%. We put an end to an importation of vehicles and encourage the Ghanaian people and even public service personnel to purchase vehicles in country as a result of the assembling vehicles that we have brought into the country. We also cut down on the opening of new public offices from the 1st of April. State CEOs, ministers and deputy CEOs and deputy ministers as well, their salaries were cut down. So if you look at a number of these measures, really, that government put in place, supposed to help the years and the months that are ahead of us. We're also aware of how confident our government had been as it relates to the implementation of the electronic levy.
Right.
We expected to rake in a lot more revenue from the e-levy, but the delayance impacted a lot more of what our desire was. From May, when we started the implementation and we received some good monies in the very early days,
right.
Millions of monies, cities in the very early days. But I mean, there was a bit of a decline. So there are very challenging times for us.
But the thing about this e-levy thing, even before you proceed with your submission, is that you were told, you were warned from the beginning that you're not going to get that 4-point-something billion you were projecting to get, because it wasn't as simplistic as that. As you look at trillions of monies that were circulating in the system, you say, let me take a portion of it. And by which you were able to project that you get billions of cedis. It wasn't as simplistic as that. That's one. And then the second thing where you're told is that, look, it is rather going to slow down activities on the fintech, within the fintech space, but you didn't listen. You were hell bent on rolling out this tax policy handle, and so who calls them?
Moro, it's the Ghanaian people's responsibility to ensure that the tax bracket is widened. If you look at the e-levy conversation, it brought to bear some significant lapses in our taxation processes, where Ghana has a population of 30.8 million people, had just close to about 8% of that working class of about 17 million people paying income tax, which meant that clearly there were a number of people that were not paying their taxes. The real essence of the electronic levy was to ensure that we widen that tax bracket to bring in the formal and the informal sector and make sure that the digital economy that has been expanded to the tune of close to about 1 trillion Ghana cedis, we have people contributing significantly. So when you ask government to bring road infrastructure or to bring a lot more infrastructure, hospital and schools and lights and water into your rural communities, you would know that you have burdens shared with the Ghanaian people. And we must always appreciate that in the process of governance, you govern as much more with the people. And that is what we sought to do. You remember very well how the opposition ranted and went above and ahead to encourage the Ghanaian people not to contribute their civic responsibility of paying taxes. And so the delayance of the passage of the e-levy...
I'm not sure. No, sorry, I'm not sure the minority were discouraging Ghanaians from paying their taxes. What the minority was saying is that the mode of paying the taxes was where they had a problem. I mean, how can they... I mean, look, the NDC will come to power someday. I mean, they can't run this country without taxes. And so what I recall, and as a journalist, fact was they're not against taxes, but they're against this type of taxes because the mode in which you intended to collect the taxes was something that was anti-progress.
At the very beginning, at the very beginning of the e-levy conversation,
right,
the NDC posit to have accepted a percentage of the e-levy.
Absolutely.
If you recall,
yes,
they asked for a 1%. They asked for a 1%.
Minority leader.
Yes, the minority leader asked for a 1%.
Yes.
And government also went ahead to even reduce it to 1.5. Now it's even gone even below, just to ensure that we have a lot more people contributing. So we do not disagree. Yes, clearly that the minority they did not clearly agree and understand that they would want persons to contribute that percentage of money. But I mean, you would know that this country is run on a number of policies that comes from government angles. And in a lot of those areas, you've also seen that the various state institutions have done very well with clearing a lot more of the ghost names that exist. I mean, earlier this week, you noticed how Senate had cleared close to about 21,000 ghost names that has saved the Ghanaian economy close to about 312 million Ghana cedis. Number of ghost names as well from NSS, 14,000 ghost names have been cleared. That has also saved the Ghanaian economy close to about 114 million Ghana cedis. Through the digitalization processes as well, as we've sought to digitalize some aspects and all aspects of the Ghanaian economy, you would realize that DVLA has been able to increase revenue from 2017 from the tune of 566 million Ghana cedis to close to about 2.3 billion Ghana cedis as of 2021. You'll also realize that online applications of passports has also increased a lot more revenue into the Ghanaian economy, close to the tune of about 56.7 million Ghana cedis. So if you look at a number of these interventions that government has put in place, we are very confident. And as President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo has stated over and over again, we are very confident that by the time the IMF gets back to us with all the conversations that we had begun, we would be able to see that the economy is bouncing back on its feet.
I see. Honorable, what's your own understanding of how we got here? It's a situation where we had all these reputable rating agencies saying that we're not credit worthy, and we know what the implications are when they say you're not credit worthy. It's either you're not going to get credit at all, or if you're going to get the credit, it's going to come at a very high premium, and that further worsens our ability to service our debts. What's your own reading and understanding of how we got here?
Thank you very much. Good morning to my fellow panelists, Mr.
Michael
Ni
Abe.
Abe and
Hargrave.
and Boachi Damkwa, and your financial analyst who
Korijimati
made
from
some
Databank.
very interesting points.
Right.
And to your viewers or our viewers and good people of Cape Coast South. How did we get here? I think we have told the story many times on how we got here. And there is a different school of thought on this, On one side, the minority and Ghanaians, and the other side, the government. And that we've been saying that, look, this is self-inflicted. And it's as a result of policies, I wouldn't say bad policies, but policies that were not sound. And the COVID, yes, have played a role. The Ukraine-Russian war has also played a role, but they just came in to expose us.
Right.
And all the things, all the policies that this government has been implementing since they came to office, been part of the problems that we are facing today. And obviously, recklessness, corruption, wasteful expenditure, lavish expenditure, call it many names. But I want to draw your attention to something which I've been getting worried about, which I think we've talked about all the problems. And look, at the end of the day, we're all Ghanaians.
Right.
What we need is a solution to solve, this problem or get us back on track and to be able to restore the economic and financial stability that we need in this country.
True.
And your financial analyst made some very interesting analogy, which actually you brought that up, to do with the doctor is here.
Right.
Well, the patient is also here. And the patient is Ghana. And the patient actually has what the Americans call a family doctor, or what the British call a GP. Now, what is wrong with the patient is now beyond the family doctor, it's beyond the GP. So the expert doctor, specialized doctor is calling. That is the IMF.
Right.
Now the IMF comes in and said, we know you are not well. We can see clearly you are not well, but we need to do some diagnosis. And that is the debt sustainability analysis. And until we've done that and know exactly what is wrong with you, I'm a brain surgeon, yes, but I can't open your head now until I know exactly which part of the brain has the problem. And that's probably going to take about 6 or so months for that to happen. For the time being, the patient is slowly and gradually dying. And that is the situation that we're in now. And if care is not taken and things are not addressed early, we are going to have a very, very, very serious problem very, very soon. And it's about time, the government gets off its high horses and all they trying to say that they can do things themselves and all that, and be truthful. Why we are here, as you did ask, is as a result of the media review not telling us or giving us any indication, not only us, but to the IMF and to the financial community, and by that I mean domestic and external community, to signal with that media review that the government is actually willing, whether homegrown policies or ones prescribed by the IMF, are really prepared to see that through to be able to get us back on track. This did not appear. And then they talk about all these things that they're doing. We've cut this by 30% discretionary expenditure, we've done this, we've done this, we've done that. The reason why the IMF is here is for two things: policy credibility. So you can talk all day about policies you put in place. Those policies have no credibility as far as the international community is concerned. And that is why you have called in the IMF to give you that credibility. The second reason why you went to the IMF is to do with investor confidence, which you don't have.
So then that begs the question, investor confidence. And I did ask Korishma this question that you've brought in the IMF in order to enhance investor or to boost investor confidence. So how come the same investors are losing confidence and trust in our ability to pay them back their money?
Treatment hasn't started.
Yeah, but the treatment will start now that the IMF or it's not guaranteed.
You cannot guarantee that.
Oh, I see.
IMF does not lend to countries that have debt that are not sustainable.
Oh, wow.
So if the analysis is done, when the IMF came and I sat in one of their meetings when they were in Parliament, and we asked them, you are here, presumably, Ghana's debt is unsustainable. Diplomatic answer is, we can't actually tell you that. The same IMF, who said that this country has a higher debt risk, few months before, is saying, we can't tell you that your debt are not sustainable until we have actually done debt sustainability analysis. And then after that debt sustainability analysis is done, that is the diagnosis, then we may ask you to restructure. And then when you start restructuring, at some stage, obviously you can't finish all the restructuring before you get into a program. So they've got to determine somewhere within the restructuring that you have done enough for a program to start. Now, the bigger problem we have at the moment is these rating agencies. And if we don't pay attention, this is where we're basically going to be destroyed from. When you go back, and I don't want to make it too long, there is a historic stuff here we need to look at. When you go back, we started, look, these institutions, your financial analyst was trying to break it down for us to understand. We hear all this Standard & Poor's, Fitch, Moody's. Who are they? Standard & Poor's, they've been around for a long time. It's the oldest, almost about 165 years. You have Fitch, over 100 years. You have Moody's, another 100 years. They've been around for a long time. They are the three biggest rating agencies in the world. There are other smaller ones. These are the ones that may give you credibility or not, especially if you start playing in the capital market. This is Ghana's problem now. In 2001 to 2005, when President Kufuor was president and decided to go for HIPIC, which actually started around 2005 or finished at 2005 or something like that. Yeah. In 2003, these agencies, as I said, they've been around for a very long time. They have never rated Ghana because we had never been in the capital market until 2003, when we had a debt distress and that we were asking the likes of the Paris clubs and all that to waive our debt. That is when they employed the services of the rating agencies to actually rate the debt that we have.
See.
So when they started doing that, the first ones that came in were Standard & Poor's and Fitch. They were here 2003. Now, fast forward, then Moody's also came in. They came in around 2009. By that time, Ghana has tasted the capital market in 2007 with President Kufuor's 250 million bond. So now we've exposed ourselves to the capital market. So all the rating agencies are here to rate us. These rating agencies, and people who have been in there, and that's what surprises me about Ken Ofori-Atta, people who have worked in an investment banking environment must understand and know these rating agencies. I dealt with these people, in my previous life, many times. And they have a model called very interesting model, called the beggar game theory model. Beggar, like hamburger.
Right.
Game theory model.
Right.
They work like how this fast food work. So if you see McDonald's here, you see Burger King here, and the others will follow. So these guys, so the beggar location game theory, based on this whole game theory concept, is that wherever you see Fitch, you're going to see Moody, and you're going to see Standard & Poor. Their ratings are pretty much along the same lines because they use pretty much the same data. The most aggressive of them is Moody's, and the very conservative one is Standard & Poor. If you look at all their ratings, and this is something that the managers of the economy should begin to understand and look at. And you can clearly, when I hear that we are disappointed that we've been downgraded, I said, hello, does somebody understand these things? Are they looking at them properly? Anytime you're going to get a further downgrade from S&P because the outlook is negative. Forget about the CCC+. The negative outlook tells you there are three outlooks. You get negative, you get positive, or you get stable.
Right.
Negative outlook tells you that things are not good. Whatever you'll be rated today is even a small fry. But the outlook, if this doesn't get corrected, you're going to go further down. So we are going to move from the CCC+ to CCC or CCC- in no time.
And that's a full junk.
Yes, that's a complete junk. The same is going to happen with the others. When they say you are stable, you know, this same story you read earlier on about the finance minister or the Ministry of Finance putting a statement out there that they don't understand where they did the same thing in February. Same statement. When Moody downgraded them to CAA1, saying that they don't understand why they've been downgraded. Like Mr. Boachi Danko was saying, we have put in place all the policies. The policies have been put in place, but they lacked credibility. The market mathematicians have something called necessary and sufficient. The policies probably necessary, but they were not sufficient in the eyes of the global market. So now the problem we have here is that you look at these agencies and pretty much what they are doing is an indication of where your market is going. Now, what did they do the last time, which I thought was quite worrying, because I thought the finance minister, and this will eat into the reason why the finance minister should go when we get to that point. The finance minister, who heads the ministry, came out and said, oh, when we got downgraded by Moody in February, it's because they brought this new lady called Lucy Villa. I'm sure you read that.
Yes, I did.
That lady is a lead analyst. Like they just made her look like lead analyst supervised by one Matt Robinson. And the woman has just arrived in January to downgrade Ghana by setting a desktop. This thing, if you indulge me, this is very, very serious. You see, prior to the announcement between 28 January and February, Moody virtually engaged senior. Okay, let's move on to that. The Moody's team was led by Lucy Villa, lead analyst, and supervised by Matt. And they said that Lucy Villa has just arrived. This is not true. Lucy, and a small investigation would have told them that the lady Lucy Villa has actually been in Moody's for 15 years, rating Ghana's debt. This is the lady in question.
So she's not new in the space.
Yes, not at all.
Yeah, she's been around.
This is the lady I'm talking about. Okay? This lady has worked for 15 years on sovereign debt ratings in Africa. She's worked on Ghana and other countries and all that for 15 years. Before that, she was actually an official of the French Ministry of Finance before he came. Now, the boss, so she's not just she's actually a vice president level, not somebody who has just arrived. Then they talked about Matt Robinson, who is just some supervisor. Matt Robinson has been with Moody's for 20 years. He is the head of sub-Saharan African rating for the last 20 years. Now, it tells you clearly that the managers of the economy actually don't know who is rating them, who they are dealing with, and the dangers that they are facing. When I mentioned, and I will end with this one, we'll carry on with the discussion. When I mentioned Kufuor's era, Kufuor went for 750, so that's our first exposure
The capital market.
to the capital market. President Mills never went to the capital market. So when President Mahama came, we still have only Kufuor 750, which was a 10-year bond and was maturing in 2017. Then under President Mahama, before he went to IMF, he had taken 2 euro bonds of 2 billion. So our exposure before we went on the program was 2.75 billion. That's what we had. Then by the time he was leaving office, once we went on the IMF, we got the credibility back. We were able to go to the market again and get some other multilaterals and bilaterals to give us money. Okay. So when we were leaving when President Mahama was leaving, our exposure was 3 billion and 0.75. Now, in the last 5 to 6 years, this government had borrowed 11 billion from the capital market. So our exposure in the capital market is now about 14 billion. So 50% of Ghana's external debt is with the capital market.
That's
now,
huge.
This is why the IMF program might not work. So now, if IMF, the doctor, comes and said, I've done the diagnosis, now you need to restructure. In Kufuor's time, when he was restructuring and going on to HIPIC, he restructured multilateral and bilateral debt because there was no Eurobond, no capital market. When President Mahama came in, or when President Mills came in and went to IMF, he had only Kufuor's thing. So the same structure
to pay.
When President Mahama came, he had just about 2.75 billion. And he was able to restructure Kufuor's debt by paying down 500 million. That was the restructuring. So when we were leaving office, Kufuor's debt, who was supposed to mature the following year, had already been paid down 500 million. And 250 million, IMF worked with us to have it in a sinking fund, which President Nana Akufo-Addo used to pay the 2017. So President Mahama didn't have much to do in the capital market. Okay? So the rating agency is still fairly quiet. Now, when you have 50% of your external debt in the capital market, the rating agencies matter a lot because they can cripple you and will make it impossible to restructure. Because the debt that you are going to restructure are being downgraded and being made junk. Basic restructuring is for you to be able to take fresh loans to retire old loans. Presumably, the old loans are more expensive than the fresh ones you are taking. Therefore, by taking fresh loans to retire the old loans and giving yourself a much lower interest payment, a much, duration, much longer duration to pay and all that, you will be able to do that. But now, when you are downgraded, any new bond that you go and take to try and retire old ones will be more expensive than the ones you intend to retire.
Which then will not be smart borrowing.
It will not be smart borrowing. Therefore, you can't restructure.
Yes, Sectequest smart borrowing was take cheaper loans to retire more expensive ones.
The situation, that's why I say the rating agencies do matter now. Because if they continue to downgrade you and continue to put your bond in junk status,
you can't access any cheap loans.
You can't access any cheap loans. Therefore, you cannot simply restructure. The market is pricing that in. And we will be downgraded again by all three agencies. As I said, the most conservative of them is S&P. When S&P downgrades you, you should sit up. The last time round, they gave us a stable. It was Moody and Fitch who down. If you look at the history.
Yes, negative outlook.
Yeah.
But they gave us stable.
Yeah, they gave us stable. Since 2020, this is the first time S&P has actually come to downgrade us.
Negative outlook.
Yes, negative outlook. So which obviously tells you that the next S&P ratings, if things are not fixed, will be going further into junk. Now, we are waiting for Moody's, and I told you they are the most aggressive ones. They had already put us in C.
In February.
CAA,
Yes,
whatever.
in February, yes.
So as I said, the beggar location game theory, they are going to come in and take us further down to CAA2. That's where we're going to head in. So if care is not taken and these guys don't sit up and get a proper understanding on what is going on, you see, I'm beginning to have a feeling that they either don't understand the economy they are managing, or things have gotten out of hand that they don't want to actually tackle it for. You cannot use long-term solutions to try and address a short-term problem and say that the issues will be resolved in the shortest possible time.
From everything that you said, the Honourable Member of Parliament, now, one of the things you need to understand is that the Honourable George Ricketts Haggard is not just an MP for Cape Coast South, he's also a former Deputy Finance Minister under the Mills regime.
We've seen it, Mahama.
Yes, under the Mahama regime. So you've seen it all.
Yeah.
You've seen it all.
We've been there.
Yes, but you were not reshuffled, were you?
Well, I went to Central Region eventually.
As a Central
in the election year.
Yeah, right. Central Regional
because
Minister. So you're reshuffled.
Yeah, we
It'll be
needed
interesting
to
to pick your thoughts on that. But let me come to Michael Abbey. Now, Michael Abbey, and I'm going to ask you my final question to you because we need to move to the topic about reshuffle. But the final question I'm going to ask you is this. Based on everything else you've said to us and based on the data you've shared with us, you've painted a doom and gloom outlook. So if you were a rating agency, you've painted a very doom and gloom outlook. Perhaps then you may want to agree with your colleague, the Honourable, the Ranking Member of Finance. Yes, Ato Forsing. He says, look, from his reading and analysis of the situation, we should perhaps just go and declare ourselves a highly indebted poor country, which is HIPIC. That's the only way that we can get ourselves out of this economic conundrum. I'll pick your thoughts on that because I'm getting that sense from you as well that even the restructuring we may not be able to do because 50% of our external debt is with the capital market.
Yeah.
Anyway, Michael, I mean, you are not an economist like me. You're not a finance person like me. But what is a fact? And it's quite obvious is that we go to the markets. We buy fuel. Not too long ago, you bought a Land Cruiser. Of course, it's been given to you by
myself?
your organization, so you didn't buy it from your own pocket. But
I don't own a Land Cruiser.
You don't
I
own,
don't have a
okay,
Land
all right, you
Cruiser.
dropped it. I didn't know that you dropped the Land Cruiser. I thought you're still driving it. But I mean, on a more serious note, but how are you, relating or dealing with the economy as an ordinary man? And what do you make of all that is happening?
Well, thank you very much, Moro, and good morning to my colleague panelists and viewers, I'm sure watching us on TV. Well, I think as Boachi Dankwa mentioned, it's a difficult time for the Ghanaian economy and for Ghanaians generally. And as a Ghanaian, going straight to your question, I feel we seem not to know the way out of the current economic challenges we are bedeviled with.
Right.
And that is a concern for me. So listening to Ricketts Haggard, for instance, clearly governance is a serious business. One's understanding of the posture, the psychology, the culture of even these rating agencies matter. And even what he just said about the fact that Standard & Poor are the most conservative. In other words, and we know that the effect of these ratings clearly would mean that more hardship. That's the fundamental thing.
Right.
It would mean that government's purse would not be adequate for government business and, of course, for even daily sustenance as far as Ghanaians are concerned. And so that is the short answer to the question I saw in your flyer. What are the implications? More hardship. Of course, the issue about how we got here, and when you listen to Boachi Dankwa, for instance, he talked about the reasons adduced even by Standard & Poor, talking about the external factors. I mean, any country has two main factors that influence the economy: internal and external.
Right.
Indeed, the extent to which you are able to manage the shocks of the external is largely dependent on how you manage your affairs internally. And so, if we come into the internal factors, we ask ourselves, what is happening internally? Then one would simply look at our expenditure patterns and our revenue patterns. Government conveniently will be talking about revenue patterns, that Ghanaians are not paying tax enough. Indeed, Boachi Dankwa alluded to the fact that just an insignificant number pay income tax, for instance. And in the thinking of government, the e-levy would have been a means to widen the tax net,
Right.
which also amounted to double taxation, for instance, as far as I'm concerned. Because my income, which was already taxed, now any transaction I do on the remaining amount is equally taxed. Double taxation, which shouldn't happen in any serious country. It is not progressive in any way. So, yes, the problem here is the fact that you have just a few paying income tax. But your antidote to addressing the problem is weak, is not strong. And again, this comes to the issue about governance being a serious issue. How we analyze problems in this country and our policy prescriptions matter a lot. So, for instance, Boachi Dankwa again, there mentions that we've done this, there have been some cuts on expenditure here and there. Laudable, fair. But you listen to Richard Egan, he talks about policy credibility. Indeed, just a couple of days ago, Boachi Dankwa mentioned that, for instance, there is halt on the purchase of new vehicles. But Kwabena Japan was on TV, who is a founding member, a member of this party, saying that there are new V8s in the system.
Right.
And this is not the time to be having these V8s all over. At this time, you don't buy V8. Now, so the difficulty here is, who do you believe? Even from the same NPP stock. And you see, it is good to say, we've done this, there are cuts here and there and all that. What I expect journalists like yourself, Moro, to be doing is to go deeper, dig deeper, follow where the money is. Where is the revenue? Where are the cuts? Indeed, are they really happening? There have been instances in Parliament, for instance, where it was revealed that government presented different sets of data to the IMF and different sets of data to Parliament. So clearly, it makes it difficult for one to trust what government says or what government puts on paper,
Right.
as far as the economy is concerned. So you may say we've instigated or triggered cuts here and there, but where is the evidence? If indeed these things are happening, clearly that should actually connect to your policy credibility matters, which would then even address your
Perhaps it's
rating
happening,
issues.
but it's not sufficient enough.
So we don't even know whether it's happening or not. And that is one of the
But you have
it's
basis,
the biggest.
Do you have basis to disbelieve or to not believe that
I
government
mentioned,
is
for instance,
implementing these policies?
for instance, that a whole sovereign parliament, a whole parliament, different set of data was presented to Parliament and to the IMF. So clearly, it makes it difficult for those of us in the development community to even ride on only government data that comes to us.
Okay.
Now, you see, when you come to the internal factors, yes, we talk about expenditure, which Boachi Dankwa alluded to, but we find it difficult discussing matters of corruption, matters of waste, and of course, incompetence generally. So, government structure is expensive. Setting up the structure for governance in itself is costly. We saw the number of ministries created by the Akufo-Addo government when he first assumed office in 2017. Ghanaians spoke about it. Whether we like it or not, this has a bearing on our fiscals. There's no two ways about that. Because you're going to create new offices, new staff indeed. I think it's on record, and the record is in Parliament, that this government has the highest number of staff working at the presidency. And the question is, what is the output as far as these measures are concerned? Because this is having a bearing on our finances. But we are not seeing the output, not to even talk about the quality of output that Ghanaians should benefit, or as far as the delivery of the public good is concerned. Recently, we talked about, for instance, even the National Cathedral. So, a government that is serious must equally be minded about prioritization. What projects do we go into? What projects do we cut? What projects do we put on hold? And what becomes the priority for government in this very moment? And since it is becoming very difficult to even believe government, and I said this on this the last time, that this issue about the e-levy is equally not about the fact that Ghanaians are not willing to pay, but it's because Ghanaians don't trust government to prudently use the resources. And you even saw the reasons, plethora of reasons adduced by government officers as far as the e-levy is concerned, where any reasonable man can see that, listen, the proceeds from the e-levy can't even buy fertilizer. The agric minister comes, he says this. The minister for, I think he's now local government, Dangote, says this. Everybody's saying what. In fact, I heard Befi, the minister, I think he's now the MP for in Eastern Region, the former
the
CEO.
deputy trade
Precise
minister.
also went to some market,
Michael
so the
Befi.
video was everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, everything was connected to the e-levy. But any reasonable Ghanaian who can analyze the data and think knows clearly that, listen, this does not add up. And this contributes to the dwindling trust that Ghanaians have in their government. And so now it becomes difficult to just accept hook, line, and sinker what government presents to us as their measures in this very tight economic challenge we find ourselves. Now, for instance, and was it a couple of weeks ago, the defense minister came out that the president has stopped using private jets, and it's because he appreciates the concerns in which the challenge,
The difficult situation we find
precisely
ourselves
in which we find ourselves. And I felt this shouldn't even happen. I mean, this statement, there's this underlying presupposition that ordinarily it should be okay.
Right.
The president still travels. He's able to move. So what it meant was that there have been options already. And if you were prudent in the management of your economy, these options would actually be your priority. And not to opt out for the luxury lifestyle that, again, places huge burden on our coffers. So, again, internal factors, first of all, discipline, as far as government is concerned. We haven't seen that. And there is this very interesting observation I've made. Anytime Ghanaians speak about current happenings, development, there is a tendency to quickly create the impression this is coming from the NDC. I know we'll be coming to the reshuffle matter.
Yes, that's
the
next
president,
topic.
for
I want us
instance,
to move to
mentioned that
Right.
these noises will be coming from the NPP. Legitimate concern, from the NDC, sorry. Legitimate concerns coming from Ghanaians. I think perhaps one of the curses of this government is the inability to decipher between the voice of the people and the voice of the opposition. And it becomes worse for them when the opposition party, the NDC, and the people are speaking from the same note. And it's because they are all feeling the same, having the same experience, going through the same economic challenges. And so as a government, when you look at everything from the perspective of partisan lenses, anything is about the NDC and the NPP, you lose out on what Ghanaians have been calling on you to do. And in any case, we are here to serve Ghanaians. We are here because of the fact that they queued and voted for us, and they have huge expectations of our government. And so, when your first action or point of action is to connect everything to the opposition party, you lose out. When that happens, it means development is shortchanged because the opportunity to listen and to perhaps remodify, reform, or even redirect whatever policies or whatever actions you may be taking is lost. And what happens is Ghanaians begin to lose trust in our democratic journey, aspiration, enterprise. So all that happens, particularly as far as the governance indicators and issues are concerned, have a direct bearing on how we even sustain our democracy. Because in the long run, people begin to give up. Indeed, you speak to NPP folks, you speak to even NPP executives, within their hearts, they know things are not going well. But you see, yes, you must defend government. And sometimes I know it's a huge burden, a huge challenge. But I think for once, we need to be concerned about this country. For once, let us have dispassionate conversations about the future of this country today. It is very interesting that in this era, we are not only talking about economic issues, but unfortunately, we're talking about our democracy, the quality of our democracy as well. In fact, it is in this era that these two issues have come to the fore conspicuously, and everybody is talking about whether we are dwindling, whether we are receding or stagnating in our democracy, while also having these economic challenges. The fundamental issue is this. No one is saying that the external factors are not having a bearing on our situation. That's the fact. But again, when you make it look as though the only factors affecting us and that which brought us where we are the external factors, we begin to feel it's more of a PR machinery, it's more of a propaganda machinery, and not about the desire to help run a country, provide a public good, and build a nation.
That's quite interesting. So those are the thoughts of an ordinary man. He's not. When I say an ordinary man, he's not an economist. He's not a finance person. He's just a governance analyst, and he's looking more at the posture of the government in this very difficult, trying times that we find ourselves in. And he thinks that the government can do much better. What do you also think? You think government can do much better with this posture? The government says it has undertaken some cuts in salaries and other expenditure, especially that which has to do with discretionary. And so, it's made on the, so for, as far as the government is concerned, it's not entirely true that they aren't doing anything about the situation. Some have said they can do more, but the government says they're doing their best. Now, let me read some of the messages that you sent to us before I move on to our next topic, which has to do with the increasing calls for a reshuffle. And when we start, that you can give us your closing remarks before you go on to talk about the calls for reshuffle. But here is it. Wow, the messages are many. Now, this one here from... Okay, so where do I start? Now, Thaddeus in Nandom says that in sum, the fundamental persistent challenge of Ghana's economy is that it is a consumption country and not a productive one. We have the opportunity now to change the structure of the economy. That's A.A. Thaddeus in Nandom. Good morning, Mr. Morrow. Tell the MPP rep that cutting down their salaries cannot solve Ghana's problem. Wasi from Tamale. Good morning, boss. I find the two parties that have been in government very different. One is truthful to Ghanaians, and the other one is always telling lies. When the economy was growing at 76% GDP rate, the former president said the meat is up to the bone, but currently we're doing about 82% GDP rate, and the president still says that they are the best managers of the economy. I can't really see the sincerity of this administration. Kojo Yabua. Good morning. My name is Zach Morrison in Tamale. We beg Nanado to kindly reduce the number of staffers and ministers to what? Look, it says, look, majority of people are starving and suffering. Stop the corruption and the arrogance. MPP is playing with a very serious matter. MPP, it says, with the increments in revenue we're talking about, what is the impact to the poor and ordinary Ghanaians? I don't really get the thrust of that statement. Salam Adam from Tamale South says, it is important for all Ghanaians to understand the government is doing so well to contain the harsh economic situation faced by the people, but let's not kid ourselves as people. COVID-19 has brought ravage to the entire world, and coupled with the Russian-Ukraine war, have gone from bad to worse. It is not about the government not doing or being incompetent like the previous NDC Mahama government, but factors are militating against the current administration, which I believe will soon be over. The downgrading by the credit rating agencies is understandable, but I have to believe that sooner than later the storm will settle. Salam Adam from Tamale. Good morning, Moro. Is it not an irony that the government spokesperson claims that the government has raked in more revenue from the digital economy, but on the other hand, government does not have the needed revenue to reimburse NAPCO trainees NABCO trainees, national service personnel, buffer stock, etc. The question is, what is the revenue accrued being used for? David Ado, Tema West. And finally, good morning, Moro. We are further up with, we're fed up, with the Kufuor and MEP with unnecessary excuses. 2017, they were blaming Mahama, and NDC 2018, they were blaming Mahama and using free SHS as an excuse. 2019, they say that they have put money in people's pockets because of free SHS 2020. Let me look at this. Free SHS 2020 COVID, 2021 COVID, 22 COVID, and Ukraine 2023. And they shouldn't die. They shouldn't die. They shouldn't lie. Sorry, God is watching. Yakubu from Salaga. I'll read the other messages. I beg, I've got 10 more to go, but we have to move on to our next topic, which has to do with the calls for reshuffle. But before we do that, let me just pick a minute, thoughts from my resource persons here. The call by the former president, John Dramani Mahama, for an immediate national dialogue to look at the way forward for the economy. Do you think it is spot on? Homegrown solutions whilst we engage in the IMF, we did with the Senchi Forum.
It is spot on, and it's a matter of urgency now.
Okay.
Why I say,
right,
from what I'm seeing. So President Mahama.
What difference would that make when we have a national dialogue?
Well, a lot of things are happening at the moment that I believe that it's either the guys, the managers of the economy again, is up to their neck with a job, and some fresh input or fresh idea is needed. Okay, journalists like you bring in a lot of people to your studio, professors, doctors, economists, people from different walks of life who have views on how the economy should be managed. People who are ordinary people who are actually feeling it. So you need to bring all these together, similar to what we did at Senchi that the MPP unfortunately decided not to attend. To have an idea whether, you see, it's one thing talking about looking for an investor confidence, and policy credibility from the IMF. What you should first be looking for is citizen confidence, your own citizens. So your own citizens should buy into, and then he did say something about the people who don't trust the government. So any revolt or anything that will happen in this country is not going to come from the IMF or the international community. It's going to come from your own citizens. So your citizens should have a buy-in. And if representatives across the spectrum of your citizens are called to have a buy-in in this, their followers or people who listen to them will begin to realize that maybe we need to start paying attention to this government and give the government the support. So citizen confidence, investor confidence, and policy credibility, the two of them will get from the IMF, but the citizen one should come from our own government.
It's extremely important.
Yes, and if the government is not prepared to do that, then obviously, we're going to have a problem.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, if the people you are leading don't buy into where you are leading them, then it will come to a halt.
I see. That's interesting. Should we declare Ghana a hippie country? Or we're
Yes.
not there yet?
I think first of all, and then from what you said with Honorable Atuforsen, was actually spot on. If you just do a back of the envelope calculation by looking at Ghana's asset, okay, let's take the politics out. Look at Ghana's asset, and by asset and liability, by asset, I'm looking at our GDP, which is basically been revised downwards. Therefore, we are not going to grow as much as we thought we were. And further interest rate increases might even worsen the situation. Then you take your revenue, which Dr. Boachi said, Danko said, we don't collect enough revenue. That we all know. Our platform for collecting revenue is not broad enough. Now, it doesn't mean that we should attack everyone on the street and ask them to pay tax. That is where the yield levy is a problematic one. We do understand we need revenue. We need to find a way to find it. The digital economy has a lot of money to be collected there. But you don't just go and pick the first fruits that you find. You've got to look at the big tree and see where the actual juice is. and then do that. So we need to do that. There are structural problems in Ghana's economy that we know that it's been there not today. Structural problem with why we are borrowing so much, yet we don't know what we use the money for. Structural problem, the biggest of them, is to do with our exchange rate. Look, when the budget was read in 2021 for 2022, exchange rate of around 6 billion, our external debt was around 27 billion US dollars. That translated to about 163 billion Ghana cedis. When the media review was done, that 6 cedis to the dollar has now become 8. Therefore, without borrowing any money, our external debt has actually increased by 60 billion. So if you look at your debt from exchange losses standpoint, your debt is not 391 that has been quoted by the Bank of Ghana. Because even from when the media review was done up until now, it's gone up to about $9 $9, so take it at $9.
It's not $9.75.
Okay, so you take just $9 from 8 to 9.
Yes.
That's just by 1 cedi increase.
Yes.
Your external debt, which is $27 billion, has actually increased by 27 billion cedis.
True.
So when you add that, it means your debt from the last time the budget was read, without borrowing any money, your debt has ballooned by about 90 billion.
Okay.
So these are the challenges that we are facing. And that is why the exchange rate is key. We need to be able to resolve that exchange. Because, look, Ghana is a cedi economy. We don't produce dollars here. We produce cedis.
True.
Basically, your external debt, you are supposed to pay it
in dollars.
In dollars, if you have the dollars. But when your exchange rate, when your export revenue is not there, when your reserve is dwindling, what are you going to use in paying? Yield levy comes in cedis. Even if you get a yield levy and you are going to pay your external debt, you are going to cause exchange rate depreciation in your economy by changing the cedis to mop up dollars in the. So it's a picture that needs to be looked at comprehensively. It's not just about saying that you are doing U-Start and Ghana Care or Batanpa. These are solutions to long-term structural problems.
Okay.
It does not give you the credibility that the international community is looking at and your own citizens to address the challenges that we are facing at the moment.
Ghanaians are calling on the New Patriotic Party to fix their incompetence. The incompetence should not be blamed on Ukraine-Russia war. We beg the NPP government, stop kidding and thinking about winning election 2024. If you fail fixing your incompetence, we beg again from Donk in Hohoi. Good morning, Moro. Government must be commended for taking bold measures to restore us to the path of fiscal consolidation through digitalization, improved revenue mobilization, and drastic expenditure rationalization. That's coming from Buahine. Good morning, Moro. You see, the government spokesperson is saying they have cut costs and other things. But just 3 days ago, I wept when I saw the convo of the president. It's weakness on the government's part to the people. I don't understand that part. Elijah Haruna from Ashaman says that, good morning, Moro. The MP should cut down expenditure to salvage the economy. And Ayu Farouk, Tamale North, Deputy Communications Officer Hopeful, says, good morning. Even the war region Ukraine-Russia, which Ghana is shamelessly comparing itself to, their inflationary rate is not radically running faster than that of ours. Ghana's economic crisis is lack of proper management. And Yakubu from Wale Wale says, good morning, boss. I think the fundamentals are weak. It's as simple as that. MP shouldn't blame COVID-19 in Russia. Raymond Cow in Lashibi says that I still don't understand reasons why a blessed country like Ghana with purely rich resources will be going around borrowing monies. Even the borrowing monies are put to good use as expected. And the manner in which they won the election on the second term there, I realized something is wrong, and thank God COVID has exposed them. Remember, our president said there's money and we're hungry, so clearly his money is coming to make money. Okay, I don't want to say it. The president's not said he's coming to make money. The government is here, the president is here to run the country, not to make money. And the manner in which so let me reserve the other messages and then come back in house and pick the final thoughts. If I can get 2 minutes from you before we go to talk about reshuffle. That's okay, Michael. So I'm not sure I can come back to you because we're running out of time because we need to do reshuffle. But what are your concluding remarks? What's the way forward? The former president is asking for an immediate national dialogue. So look at the way forward. Honorable Ricketts Hagan has supported the former president's call. He says, from where we sit, we need a national consensus. All hands on deck. We need to tap into the brains of everybody before we put that document together, which is going to form the basis upon which we're going to sit before the IMF and say, this is what we've prepared, and this is what we think is the way forward. Give us a program. What do you make of that? Is the government prepared to how do you call it, to organize this national dialogue for everybody to bring their brains on board, their thoughts on board as to what the way forward should be?
When the president, after the cabinet meeting, instructed literally that the finance minister engages the IMF and invites them in country, there was a team that met with the IMF. And the IMF have come in country. They have taken all the conversations. They have gone back. We should be expecting them to come back with some feedback. We are very confident that the earlier conversations that we had with the IMF is primus inter pares of what we would expect in the coming months from feedback from the IMF.
You don't think you need the input of other section of Ghanaians? I mean,
the Ghanaian people have made significant inputs, and our government is a listening government, and we've heard them.
How are you tapping into that inputs that the Ghanaians? I mean, which cross section of when you say Ghanaians, I mean, how are you? What's even the word? How are you getting these inputs? I mean, how?
Well, there are 7 pillars of the society. I mean, media is part of the pillars. I mean, civil society is part of the pillars.
Okay.
All these people have had inputs and conversations, and our government is a listening government.
Okay.
And we've paid heed to those
so it doesn't
conversations.
look like the former president's call is going to be heeded too.
Well, I've stated that when the president asked that the finance minister begins conversation with the IMF, and the IMF came in country, there was a team that met with the IMF. And that team is solid enough to continue the conversation.
Engaging, not the government engaging. IMF is not part of government.
Well, the government engaged with the IMF.
Yes.
The government did engage with the IMF.
Yes, but has the government created a platform for people like me, Michael, Honorable, to come and say, this is what I think we should do?
This is a simple platform. I'm here. I've listened to the conversations.
All right, let's now listen. Let's now
have a bite at this.
Yes.
Forgive me. Because I think it's a very, very crucial thing
Right.
when you talk about participatory democracy.
Right.
Indeed, yes, we can say there are conversations all over, and government is picking thoughts here and there,
Right.
and that may have contributed to the arrangements that Ghana government has with the IMF. Whereas in as much as optics matters in politics, I mean, giving real meaning to participation equally matters. And I don't think that a call for a national platform to have such a conversation is
It's
not.
misplaced.
I mean, it's in the proper and right order. Now, listen. You see, when you get to hit this way and the IMF comes in, what is needed, first of all, is some sober reflection, some thinking processes that would help you to come up with your own. You see, when people come at you in the point of need, you are the weaker party, and if you don't take care, anything that is thrown at you, you just pick them, which may not inure to your long-term benefit. So you need some space and time to engage, seek people's input,
Okay.
thoughts, perspectives about the way forward, which I think is what the former president was calling for.
Okay.
And this could help us come up with some form of an homegrown policy
Okay.
that we can now go to them and listen, this is what we have. But when you do this in a rush,
Okay.
I bet you're going to come back
Okay.
and not being able to still address the structural issues.
Okay. All right.